Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, first they came for your gas stoves. Now it's your gas water heaters. What's next? Should the U.S. women's national soccer team be required to sing the national anthem? And which summer blockbuster movie will you watch? Finally, who said this? I grew up in Montgomery County. The Washington Redskins were the #1 franchise. We need to get back to those days. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, and former County Council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. The continued assault on gas appliances by national, state, and local governments continues rather unabated. This week, the U.S. Department of Energy issued a proposed regulation that would ultimately accelerate deployment of electric heat pump water heaters in the name of, you got it, efficiency standards. Mike, according to the Energy Information Administration, the market for water heaters is fairly evenly divided between gas and electric water heaters. Now, the proposed standards announced by Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm is scheduled to take effect in 2029 if it's finalized. And it's expected to save, government figures again, $200 billion and reduce more than 500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions over the years. Of course, it didn't discuss the cost of the new water heaters. But this proposed the water heater industry, the gas water heater industry, opposes proposed regulation because the cost to incorporate condensing technology required by the regulation will price gas water heaters out of the marketplace. Given that the technology that is being advocated by the Biden administration already exists, why not just let the market decide?
Well, I think that's a way to approach it. I think the challenge, and it's interesting that we're having this conversation during the hottest month in the history of the world, of the planet. I think I saw something yesterday that said it's the hottest.
Come on, Mike, it's July for
120,000 years.
It's supposed to be hot in July.
It's supposed to be hot in July, but it's not supposed to be 102 degrees in the water off Key Largo.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean,
it's a different conversation.
So we continue to try to find the ways that are going to address how we're going to get climate change under control, how we're going to reduce carbon emissions and be able to move forward. Are those ways going to be easy? They are not. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of pain. And unfortunately, if we're going to try to get there, we're going to have to set some criteria and some standards, and the market by itself, I don't think is going to be sufficient to make that happen because people don't want to change. I don't want to change. And yet we're witnessing what happens if we don't right now across the entire country.
You know why we don't want to change, Mike? Because that doesn't work.
Well, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think
work.
We don't want to change because it's different from what we had.
High efficiency appliances don't work. That's why people don't want to change.
I'm not sure people are giving that much thought to it. I think people don't want to change because they don't want to change. We are very static animals. We like things the way it is, and if we don't have to change it, that's a good thing, even though things require that we should.
Well, I think we're making a mistake of framing this as a binary choice between sort of supporting, thinking climate change needs to be addressed and addressing these particular policies. One of the paradoxes of this particular mandate is that the 2029 mandate moving to electric away from gas will come at a time when a substantial proportion of our electricity will still be generated by coal. So you have what should be a very disturbing prospect if you're a climate, if you're concerned about the climate, of transitioning from heat of generating water from natural gas, which is more efficient, but using coal instead. This is, I think, an example where we're not stepping back and looking at the policy choices. We're just treating it as a binary choice between, do you think that climate change is a problem or not? And that's not the issue at this point.
No, I agree. I agree with you, Mark. I think that's an interesting challenge. I was listening to a presentation yesterday, the day before, where the mandates for Great Britain, the United Kingdom, be able moving to all electric vehicles, and that they need to do 10 times as many charging stations in the next 9 years as they've done in the last 10 years. And there's a reality of, we have to establish some policies. We have to be moving in a direction. And then there's the reality of, how do you get there from here? And so I agree with you. All of these pieces are confluences, and you've got to take them into context. I think you need to set markers and benchmarks, and you also need to live in the real world and figure out what's working, what's not working, and how do we make these transitions in a way that they're effective.
Well, I think that's a great point, Mike, because Washington Post columnist Henry Olson alleges there's a growing backlash to some of the climate policies, and points out that Germany has backtracked on its proposal to ban fossil fuels home heating until after the election because the proposal is so unpopular.
Well, I was going to observe, Germany is really an example of kind of head scratching policies in this area. They've made the transition because they had generated a substantial proportion of their electric power from nuclear, and they're now trying. They keep delaying the date, but they want to transition away from that. That is the sort of the cleanest fuel that's available, and it's not a question of building new plants, which is another conversation. They already have them, but they want to, frankly, they want to get rid of them.
So, Mike, how do we achieve that balance that you and both Mark were talking about between reality and what we would like to see as future policy?
I think that's always the crux of policymaking. We've got to be in a situation where you have to achieve, you have to set goals, you have to be working towards something. And so I think, one, you have to acknowledge that there are challenges that we're trying to address. Second, that in order to get there, we have to make change, and we have to be moving in a direction, and things are going to be different. Third, I think we also need to take into account, as we're making that change, some things are going to work better than we anticipated. Some things are going to work less well than we anticipated. And so how do you then accommodate that as you're learning that along the way, and recognize that making those changes, you haven't given up on the initial policy objective, you're reacting to reality. And we do that very, very poorly, unfortunately, in a policy making perspective.
Well, I think we underestimate the American people and their willingness to make change. I believe, we have seen a 14% drop in CO2 emissions from the United States in the last 5 years. And it's not just government mandates that have done that. The American people are very willing, if they're given proper guidance and leadership on these issues, to make changes. I don't think we need government regulations to enforce all of the changes that are necessary to save, to address climate change, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I like that, but I don't think we'd have seen the reductions that we've even seen, which probably are still far, far less than what they need to be. But I don't think we'd have seen that unless we had started having that conversation and putting criteria out there for people to be shooting for. People aren't just one day going to say, it's really hot, I'll bet I should change how I'm purchasing my vehicle or what I'm getting for my gas range.
Well, I think government should be leading and not mandating. We have to go on to our next topic, and this is one that has kind of been a burr under my saddle for a long time, which is, when you're representing your national team, should you act like you're representing and be proud of your national team? This week, the U.S. women's national soccer team has been a powerhouse over the last 2 decades. And at the start of the World Cup matches in Australia, the majority of the team members did not sing the national anthem prior to their matches against either Vietnam or Holland. Mark, the Twitterverse, maybe you shouldn't always base judgments on the Twitterverse.
I mean, the Xverse, the Twitterverse exists no more. The Xverse now.
You can see what an old-fashioned dog I am, Mike. Mike, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Anyway, the Twitterverse has called the action of the national team members disrespectful to our country, and said other countries, their teams proudly sing their country national anthem. What's wrong with the American women or American teams in general?
Well, I think there should be, historically, there has been a unifying aspect to watching sports together, whether it's regional or local because you're supporting your team, or on a national, on an international arena, your national team. And it's unfortunate because this creates how shall I say, the cultural divide, the divisions that exist within our society, precisely when there's an opportunity for that to be sort of a sense of unity. It's unfortunate. The protest is purely symbolic. It's simple demonstration, virtue signaling, whatever you want to call it. There's really no positive consequence other than to frankly marginalize the support that might otherwise be enjoyed by the team.
But doesn't it all, Mike, and this question is for you, doesn't it ultimately come down to integrity? If you don't respect your country, if you want to send a symbol of protest, then why become a member of the national team? You volunteer to become a member of the national team. It's not, you're not just selected because you're such a great player. You have to try out for the team. If you hate your country, why become a member of the national team?
Well, I guess I would take exception with the way with that framing, Casey. I don't think the fact that you don't sing the national anthem means that you hate your country. I've served our country in a lot of different capacities, and one of the reasons I served that was because it allows people to choose how they engage and how they represent and what's important and how they show that. Unfortunately, we have now taken the national anthem from Colin Kaepernick, and from that perspective, and it's been a polarizing activity. And so if you sing it, you love us. If you don't sing it, you must hate us. And if you put your hand over your heart, that's good. If you don't put your hand over your heart, that's bad. And I think, lots of people are looking for lots of things. And I think that becomes the real challenge. I think the best part about America is we are a community and a culture of freedom and choices. And that's what I think it's about. And so I think by presenting the way they have, they show that that's okay. And I'd like them all to sing, and I'd like them all to have their hands over their hearts. But the opportunity for them to choose not to is also a reality. And I think that's part of what makes us a great country.
Well, Mike, you're going to have the last word. When we come back from this short break, Barbie, Oppenheimer, or Sound of Freedom, which summer movie will you watch? And what does this reveal about your inner self? Stay tuned. And welcome back. Psychologists like to interpret the movie viewing habits of Americans, especially during the summer blockbuster season. Mark, experts believe that there is a reason some of us are more interested in one type of movie compared to others. Not just that, but that our favorite movie genre can actually reveal a whole host of personality traits and characteristics. So there's a reason that you might prefer comedies over thrillers, but does it reveal your true inner self?
Well, this is kind of a scary question because right now Amazon and I guess Netflix as well have the ability to drill down and see what your choices are over a period of time. Of course, they don't know who's listening on which account, but it's another issue altogether. But it strikes me that there must be some real data mining going on. If you're watching Danish police shows, what does that say about you? I don't know.
Well, there's obviously, a psychology here, and you're right about data mining. Mike, according to a study by Michelle C. Poots, an associate professor of political science at the University of Dayton, she notes that movies can be a great mechanism for conversations and reflection. It's also the most accessible form of art that is out there, she says. People are of most walks of life experience movies, from the working class to the super rich, and it provides a common experience for society to talk about issues with a bit of a safety net without being too confrontational. But she goes on to say, it's a leap to conclude how one political's leanings affects one's movie-going experience. I'm not sure we can pin down the directionality of partisanship and movie watching. Do you agree with Dr. Poots?
I guess I would have to. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I've never really thought about movie going from a political perspective. I think I see movie going as an entertainment function. And so that's why I go, and I assume that's why others are there. And I'm always fascinated by what people find interesting and engaging and entertaining, and what people don't. I hadn't seen the John Wick series, for those of you if you guys have or haven't. And so I told that to my office team, and I was excoriated for not having seen that series. So I watched it all and then saw what it was, and it was adventure, but it was also very violent. And I just didn't, and I enjoyed it. But I didn't, I was, the people who were advocating for it, I was very much astounded by, but clearly it was very entertaining. And so I couldn't figure out where you put that. So I think that people go to movies to be entertained. And I think that it does elicit some things to be able to talk about. Some things can be provocative, and that's good and a good place to talk about it. But that's kind of how I see it. I don't see it from a political perspective.
Well, so here's the question as we go to break here. There are 3 blockbuster movies in circulation right now: Barbie, Oppenheimer, and Sound of Freedom. Which of these movies will you watch this summer, and your choices reflect your political persuasions? I'll start with you, Mark.
Well, I'm looking forward to Oppenheimer, but I have to say that my mother, my wife, and my daughter are planning this next week to go see the Barbie movie together. So I don't know if that's gender specific or what.
What about you, Mike?
My family's all seen Barbie, and I have it's been advocated that I should also go, because it's not just a female movie. And judging from the numbers, it's clearly not. So I will see both Barbie and Oppenheimer. Both are on my list. I thought I'll do the Barbenheimer.
I've seen Sound of Freedom. It's a fabulous movie. It's a depressing topic, child exploitation and child kidnapping, but it's a very compelling movie. I want to see Oppenheimer for historical reasons, just to see if it matches up to the famous Paul Newman movie Fat Boy and what was the other part of that tall. It was about preparing the atomic bomb. But I also am going to go see Barbie because the women in my family all want to see Barbie, which for me is a bit trifling, but what the heck? It doesn't really mean much at all when you look for summer entertainment. Now on to our final topic, which is probably the most important topic we've discussed in 2 years, I think, which is the Washington football team. Who said this? I grew up here in Montgomery County, and the Washington Redskins were the #1 franchise. We need to get back to those days. So, Mike, was this Daniel Snyder of Rockville or Josh Harris of Chevy Chase?
I actually thought it was Daniel Snyder, but back when he purchased his team the first time. Ironically, I thought that quote was attributed to him, but I will see if I'm right.
So, Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think that they had to get rid of Dan Snyder because there was no way. This is the bringing it back to the political. That no one was going to subsidize a stadium for Dan Snyder. So, if ever anybody had created a toxic brand, it was him. So I guess Josh Harris comes in, and we'll see what the state of Maryland ends up doing.
Well, the answer to the question is that was Josh Harris, but it is striking how, the similar backgrounds between Dan Snyder and Josh Harris. And I remember when Snyder purchased the team from John Cook, Jack Kent Cook's son, how a great deal of attention was from the fact that he grew up a Redskin fan, grew up in Rockville, and was a devoted fan of the team. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But what I'm surprised about, and maybe you are not, is the amount of interest being paid to the sale of the football team. I thought the Redskins, as a sports franchise, was kind of a dead entity. Any thoughts on your part?
No, I think it's an incredible market. I think people recognize that. I think it's an incredible brand. In spite of the last 20 years, I think the tradition is tremendous. And so I think that, and I also think that there was, we all like to watch the train wreck that's happening. And I think that whether you were on the inside of football or in the community, I think everybody saw that the Daniel Snyder ownership was a disaster, and everyone was rooting for a way to get out of this. The NFL owners, it was portrayed back in the spring that they wouldn't be able to vote until sometime in late August, September, because of all this stuff. They couldn't get this done fast enough. So when you look at that, clearly they wanted to get this done just as much as the people in the community did. So I think I'm actually excited to see it because, there hasn't been that much that I think has brought. We've had the World Series, we've had the Stanley Cup, and I think that's been good, but I think we've really lagged over the last few years. And I think whether I like it or not, the Commanders, the Redskins, the Washington football team have been a thing that has brought our community together. And I look forward to that as an opportunity again.
So Mark, I'm glad to note that you are not a New York Jets fan like our former
well, I grew up in Buffalo, so those are fighting words. So
well, no,
if I'm going to support a New York team,
I don't want you to be like Phil Bell and support the Jets.
So, but there's an interesting point there, which is that the loyalties that you develop as a kid, you end up staying. So I must say, in the AFL, the Bills are still my team. And I'm struck that my son, who grew up in Bethesda, lives in Denver the last decade. He's not a Broncos fan. He still roots for Washington. So those loyalties are hard to shake. Even if you have a toxic owner, you kind of stick to those loyalties over a period of time.
Well, back in the old AFL, NFL days, Cookie Gilchrist of the Buffalo Bills was one of my heroes, naturally, because I wanted to be a running back, even though I was built for being a lineman. So
I thought you were going to say it was Jack Kemp, because he was both an athlete and a politician, and you loved him for both respects.
Well, I was just going to say Jack was Cookie's quarterback, as I recall.
That's right.
So yeah.
Too bad the Kansas City Chiefs kept them from winning too much, and the New England Patriots back then, or Boston Patriots at that time, even, were pretty darn good. Anyway, thanks, guys. When we come back, we'll have parting shots. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mike Knapp.
So, well, thank you, Casey. We're in the middle of summer. It's the hottest that we've seen. It's the hottest summer of all time. And I just want to encourage everyone to take care of themselves, especially as I've read, men from the ages of 18 to 45 tend not to be doing the things they ought to outside and drinking water. And so recognize that we are all fallible, and take appropriate steps to stay healthy and stay safe in the sun. And I just want to commend everybody again, as I did the last time. Take some time for yourselves. Mental health is important, and please take some time to offload and recreate a little bit, so we can come back a little stronger in the fall, and that we're all in better places.
Thank you, Mike. Now with parting shot, Mark Uncapher.
Casey, congratulations are in order to former Governor Martin O'Malley, who has been nominated to be the administrator of the Social Security Administration. A little bit of snark there, because it may be for some appropriate place for him, since the Social Security Administration is running out of money. Not that that's really the responsibility of the administrator. That's the responsibility of Congress and the president to come up with a solution. So congratulations. And to all our listeners, have a wonderful summer. And I agree with Mike. Be careful and be safe while you're out.
Mike and Mark, I want to thank you for appearing this week. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. As is our custom, we will be like the French and take August off. So we will see you again in September. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.